Let's move to Washington. Let's go out west. They start 10-0 for the second time in program history after they beat Utah 35-28. I did get my cover from the Utes. That was a brilliant football game that Utah played. Tough, rugged, physical. Bryson Barnes gave it his all. A blocked field goal at the end helped get Utah one last drive, one last chance at tying it up before Barnes ultimately threw an interception. But I mentioned it's the second time in program history that Washington has started 10-0. The last time they did that, you and I weren't even born yet, 1991, when Washington shared the AP National Championship with the Miami Hurricanes. So certainly good historical precedent for the Huskies. What impressed you the most tonight from, or I guess this afternoon, from Washington?
Well, Michael Penix was Michael Penix, right? And you quoted the Utah DC here in our Morgan Scaley in our show notes that he said Penix would have to earn his Heisman tonight. 332 yards, 3 total touchdowns. But man, the Washington defense pitched a shutout in the second half, and that was really impressive to me. They've been much maligned. I know they gave up 42 last week to USC. A lot of teams are going to give up a lot of points to Caleb Williams, and I know that they've given up points in bunches at times, but this is a defense that has a lot of talent. And I think they're underrated statistically. I think that the stats don't tell the whole story on this very opportunistic defense. They got blitzed in the first half. Bryson Barnes put up 28 points on them in the first half, but shut them out in the second half, gave their team a chance to win. And that really, really impressed me. Maybe that's a turning point for this defense as they go down the stretch. But yeah, Washington, to me, should be considered for the number 4 spot this week. I think that they've shown a lot. That's a very quality win against Utah. You don't want to play the Utes in November, and they handled their business nicely this week.
I was very impressed with how Washington responded in that second half. You watch the back and forth nature of that first half, and I went, oh boy, this is where it falls apart, right? This is where the Cinderella story ends. And instead, that's not what happened at all. Penix throws for over 330 yards, 3 total touchdowns. I was really impressed with the resolve from this Huskies team, and we talked about it in the preview show. This was a defense that came in 103rd in the country in total defense. They were not known for getting stops consistently, and so when you have a big first half, you're not exactly counting on the Huskies to make enough defensive adjustments to slow them down, or at least get to the point where you could think about a shutout, let alone actually do it. This Washington team, they're not blowing folks out like they were early in the season, right? And obviously a lot of that was against lesser competition. They're going to have to win these 35-28 ball games in order to survive. But it got me thinking. Let's say Washington makes the playoff this year, right? They run the table. They beat Oregon twice. They're in. Does Washington have what it takes to win it all, or are they reminiscent of last year's Ohio State team that could score with the best of them, but really struggled to get a stop when it absolutely counted?
Yeah, I think, in any given Saturday situation, they definitely can, win a game on the field. They've got an electric quarterback wide receiver combo that can go a long, long way when you just need to win 1 and 2 games. But to me, the comparison might be more TCU last year. Like, I think they're running out of the gates. The defense is a little suspect, but they've got just a quarterback and a wide receiver that have a mind meld right now, like reminiscent of Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston last year. I think it's a more talented version of Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston, to be sure. But I think, they could get a Michigan. They could, just outpace Michigan, outpace a Ohio State maybe with Kyle McCord at quarterback, but then maybe run into a buzzsaw in the national championship game, right? Like, I don't know that they get beat like we saw TCU get beat last year, but they remind me more of TCU in that sense, maybe more so than Ohio State.
I think they're too talented to me to have TCU be the first thought. I think their defense. Listen, TCU got all the breaks last year, right? All the bounces went their way. In fact, today before the Texas game, they showed a graphic Last year, TCU was 6-1 in one-score ball games. This year, they coming into the Texas game were 0-3. They're now 0-4 after falling to the Longhorns. We'll talk about them a little bit more in just a minute as well. But yeah, Washington can do it more explosively through the air, I think, than TCU did. TCU was so balanced, right? They could hand it off, they could play bully ball. Washington has started to do that a little bit more with Dylan Johnson, but he's really only broken out the last
couple weeks.
Yeah, he's broken out the last couple of weeks, but no doubt Washington wants to throw it over the top. And so in that way, I think they remind me of CJ Stroud throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Emeka Egbuka, stuff like that. I might even think, though, that Ohio State's defense was better than what Washington has had this season. Now, they've gotten it to work. They beat Oregon, right? They've come up with all the stops when they absolutely had to, but their inability to consistently get stops for the defense to control a game, I think, is what is reminding me of that Ohio State team, right? Where, listen, TCU and Michigan was a shootout, but when TCU needed to stop the run, they could stop it, right? They had the scheme drawn up. I don't know if Washington has that schematic element that takes away one half of the ball game. Am I wrong there?
Well, I don't know that they do, but back to your question of can they win a national championship? Ohio State was a missed field goal away from winning a national championship last year. I think that's fair to say when you look at TCU's performance in that national championship game. So, with that in mind, even if they are a 2023 version of last year's Ohio State team, then yeah, I think in any given Saturday scenario, if they can play their best game against Georgia or whoever they run into as the 1 seed, they can sneak into that championship game and then anything can happen.
Gracious hip, how